I just wanted to introduce Brick. So some time ago, we started a podcast, and we wanted to, in addition to doing roundtables, we also wanted to tell stories of people that do learning and development and how they got into that. And what I got really excited about Brick is his non-traditional sort of approach and how he got into L&D. He started as a movie maker, storyteller, then educator, was a teacher at one point, was then teaching teachers how to teach and tell stories. And then Brick got into Amazon, and he was sitting outside of the L&D community. It was more in the knowledge management team. And he chose not to do the traditional sort of like, let's build a SCORM packages, but was rather leaning onto a quick and dirty YouTube videos, it was sort of like an internal video library, and started experimenting how to quickly deliver what Amazon people needed internally to learn. And so he took that on from experimenting at Amazon to HeatSpring, which is a startup. So going from a giant company to a much smaller company. And at the startup, he also continued experimenting with that even more, where he would take very large bodies of knowledge, think like manuals and books and PDFs and things like that, and figuring out how to quickly convert them into a learning material. So how do we go for something that is a knowledge base, and how do we convert that into something that people can actually use for learning and not just like reading, like you would typically do that. So today's story is really about leaning onto AI to quickly develop learning material from large bodies of knowledge. So with that, I'm gonna pass it on to Brick Mayer. Welcome, Brick. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Marco. That was an excellent introduction and overview. And I will share my screen and just dive right in. Can you see my screen okay? Thumbs up. All right. Let's get started. Yeah, so I think just a quick background on me. I was, like as Marco said, I'm at HeatSpring right now. Very small company compared to where I was at before. We're a team of about 4 with kind of contractors up to about 6. And then previously I was at Amazon. So different scale, but really exciting to take what I learned at Amazon and kind of a big structure like that and apply it to a startup. And I am passionate about learning, and I'm excited by AI, and I'm slightly terrified, and I'm mostly joking, but there's also some seriousness there about using this tool and understanding how we can leverage it, but also recognizing that there needs to be kind of a thoughtful use of it. And hopefully I can communicate that today. Just a little bit, really briefly about HeatSpring. We're a learning management platform that is for renewable energy training. We're very small in sense of like, we're a small team, and we have about 350 courses, and they're big courses. They're certifications. Like sometimes they're 20 hours or 40 hours, and you know, lots of content to get through, very technical. And our main platform is a video streaming platform, kind of like maybe Udemy or Coursera, similar. We have other assignment types, text, downloads, links. We do have formative assessments, and if we get time to talk about, that's like a really good example of how I was able to scale AI integration into our platform with our developers by putting formative assessments in, and we have summative assessments as well. And discussion boards, surveys, ratings, kind of a standard LMS, but it's custom built. And we don't work inside the SCORM world. We're working on integrating other packages in there, but currently when we're building a course native to our platform, it's not SCORM. So yeah, I think anything I work on here probably could be applied to storyline or articulate kind of workflows, but just to situate these projects, they're not going into a SCORM package. Nothing against SCORM, but as Marco said, I kind of grew up in the tech world outside of a traditional learning design community. This is interesting. As a leader in AI and has been for years, kind of pulled up this McKinsey study that showed, where AI is affecting industries. And I saw that education and workforce training was right at the top. And that really resonated with me, and how over the last 18 months or 2 years, we've integrated these new tools into our process. And we are in kind of, I would say, post AI ubiquity. It's not a fad, it's here, it's growing, and there's like different kinds of use. It shows up in the tools and platforms that we have subscriptions to. And I think of it as active versus passive. And passive might not be the right word, but I'm trying to describe the situation where Google or Microsoft or other platforms are just kind of embedding an assistant or a feature into the tool and is there for you to use. And active, I guess, and to contrast that, and what I'm talking about today is going kind of behind the curtain or into the prompt, into the system prompt, maybe working on doing API calls or things like that, like um, rolling up your sleeves a little bit more to build out something custom to what you're doing. And you're not doing that inside a little chat window inside a platform. These are just some of the tools that are out there. The one that we use at HeatSpring is Anthropic. That's our main go-to. We like its security, its transparency on how it handles copyrighted material, and its coding functionality is great with Claude Sonnet 3.7. And totally dating this now in April of 2025. This is that, but that was the current state of the art that we were using. Um, I do use some of these other ones just in my own work, but for building courses, it's primarily Claude. And some of the things that we've built out of this, they kind of, I think, go into three big buckets when we're using AI. It's customer education. Um, we'll work with a lot of companies that have document repositories that are dense product manuals, typically built by engineers for installers. And so they're single line diagrams, data heavy, uh, not necessarily consumer friendly in the sense that you're not going to learn about this product from this manual. So we'll start with that, and we can build something out of it. We also will work with organizations like ASHRAE to build out workforce development packages. And this could be instructor-led training, a set of slide decks with speaker notes that someone delivers in person across the country at their sites. Or we also created self-directed learning video modules based on a workflow that I'll demo and going to go through today, where we start from a knowledge repository, work through a couple different AI tools, and then arrive at something that can be turned into an output video that's narrated by AI. And then down here, this certification, preparing learners for like passing exams, uh, job growth, career ladders, increase in pay. Like certifications really mean a lot to our students, and so we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can improve those with AI. Yeah, so just to kind of put some numbers on it, when I'm talking about like customer education, you could have three dense product installation manual. They typically tend to be PDFs. In this example, is 184 pages with about 50,000 words, and we reduced that into around about a 28 slide deck overview that will result in a 7-minute customer-facing overview product introduction. And that was all done. I would say that one was actually fairly quick. That was about 3 weeks. They need that for a conference that they want to present, and so we worked with them on that. ASHRAE, this one was a bit longer. Probably took us about 6 months of work to get this one because there's a lot of SME review and subject matter experts, humans in the loop, looking at this. And so AI is fast, humans are slow, and I think that's okay and important because we want to use the tools to get us to a stage to evaluate and look at the content, and then the experts need to sift through it, provide feedback, iterate. And so this one was created 3 hours of instructor-led training, 90 minutes of video, and we were starting with a 130-page book, 9 chapters, 60,000 words, about 110 images. Those metrics there are just kind of for context windows and what these models can handle, and that's always evolving and growing. Seems like we're getting into the million context window, at a point where you're not really paying attention, but it is important for performance and cost when you're using these to kind of know what you're starting with. I would say that in all of these, and I just want to reiterate that whenever we upload any of this content, we have permission from the copyright owners, and we use Claude in a way that doesn't expose any of their copyrighted material out, doesn't leak out. And I know for some folks on this call, that's like even that's like you can't. That's not good enough. I worked at Amazon, and InfoSec was always our joke that they were just the department of no, and anything that goes anywhere else off-prem was just a non-starter. So we're fortunate to be able to test and tinker with these tools, and but we do kind of take copyright seriously, and we get permission before we upload any of these things. The case study for today is looking at a healthy home evaluator certification that I built. This one is interesting because in that ASHRAE example, we really leaned on subject matter experts pretty heavily to vet the content, and then we kind of flipped it and said, how much of it can I build for as a person at HeatSpring, and then use the subject matter expert in kind of 6 weeks, about 2 hours of their time each week. So 12 hours of contact time over 6 weeks to develop a 3-hour course with 50 assessments. And we were starting from a government repository that's in the public domain to use. They had, I think, 12 static PDFs, 70,000 words, hundreds of images. And this one's interesting because the images that I could potentially pull from the PDFs, I think did have a copyright issue, and I didn't want to just put those in there. And so the only thing I can show you today is how we really kind of lean heavily on image creation for this course. So this will be our case study. Yeah, and then just to kind of set the context, Al, I'm going to get into the demo here pretty quickly, but I want you to be thinking about expert in the loop, human in the loop, and why that's important. And it's where it's regular checkpoints that we're involving the subject matter experts to vet and prune hallucinations, add context and expertise, and it ultimately just improves the output. But I don't trust AI to build something without someone reviewing it, and I wouldn't publish it. And I don't know, that sniff test is just sometimes if you look at the mod what it creates, and you kind of read something and it's like it kind of sounds right, but then the more I read it, the more it just doesn't mean anything. And sometimes it can do that. And so you really want to make sure you're not putting that out into your training. So the important part of kind of peeling back the curtain and being in that active role of using AI at HeatSpring is understanding how a prompt works in the system prompt versus the user prompt, and understanding what that looks like. And so I'm just going to exit out of here and go to, oh, I think I already had it opened up. I'll go here. And so to look at this prompt, let's zoom in here. You have a system prompt, which is the persona and the expertise that you're giving in your kind of I don't want to use the word tuning because you're not fine tuning anything, but you are kind of directing the focus of the expertise of the model into a certain area. And so we found this to really improve the output. And saying that you have a background in HVAC, you have 30 years experience, and you're an instructor, like all these things, and you're narrowing expertise. Also providing structured XML tags. This is something that came straight from Anthropic's documentation to tell it what do you want it to do, and then providing explicit examples. In our case, we find that JSON is just the best, most portable, stable, reproducible format to use when we're passing it back and forth between Python or our API calls for our developers. We always just aim it towards JSON. And so to get what we want, we say this is what we want. And it might be worth pausing on this one here, because this is actually when we build an initial slide deck for the SME to review. It's a text-based slide deck with a title, speaker notes, and text on screen with an image description. Those are kind of the main components and the building blocks that we start with. And we want that to be repeatable, and we want it to kind of stay within a range of 120 to 140 words, and that we're flexible there based on the topic in particular, and we don't just want to rigidly kind of only do that, but it's a starting point. This is the system prompt. The user prompt is where you would kind of give the, what's the prior knowledge of the learner? How are they is this foundation levels course? Are they an expert? Are they tenured? How much vocab do we need to define? What are the learning objectives, module title? And then we'll provide an outline and the actual, the document, the context. Like, what are we looking at? And this is coming from that knowledge repo. And there's a couple different ways we use this. I started out, I don't know if folks on the call are familiar with Claude's workbench, but it's kind of where you, as a developer, you can like build out the script. And I'll show you examples of that. Since then, Claude projects, which I'll talk about, has gotten a lot more powerful where you can kind of hone your kind of local knowledge repository in the browser. And we found that to be really great and stable, and we still use Workbench if we're getting something ready for our developers, but otherwise I'm just in cloud projects. So this is the anatomy of a prompt. And let's see, we'll go back to full screen. The other important concept before I kind of go in and kind of show you the case study is just grounded knowledge. This is, you're providing domain specific information. Maybe it's all those PDFs, documents, whatever you're working on, you're providing that and nothing else. And you're telling it to only look at this. Do not go to the web to pull in information. Only use what I give you. And that's really important for the product manuals and the technical guidelines. We can't have to be pulling in information from outside. And this also helps us to address copyright concerns that we're only using what we have permission to use. Gemini, Google Notebook LM is an example of one. Perplexity Spaces is the grounded knowledge, and Workbench and Cloud Anthropic projects. That's what we tend to use for most of our things. And then a Workbench, like I was saying, is kind of where you can really tinker with and hone the system prompt, the user prompt, and you can get output that way as well. Yeah, I think I addressed this. We'll just see this in action. But this just allows us to kind of hone and tune it. And there's this really cool part of instructions telling it to do a certain thing over and over again. I'll kind of highlight that and why that's really helpful. Because you can I have all these different projects that do different things. I have a project that does image prompt writing. I have a project that adds insert slides. I have a project that builds learning paths. And so I kind of have this like gallery of projects that I use depending on what I want in a given task. Okay, so our case study is that Healthy Home Evaluator course. And the one final context is that I kind of thought, just to kind of give you a sense of like, how am I working from start to finish, from like inputs to an output artifact? What does it look like? This is our kind of a course development workflow. I use Napkin AI to build this out. Some of you might recognize that as a great visualizer tool. Fantastic. But then I have this other one that I think I like a little more, that I'm going to just go through to show you what our process looks like. And I'm going to go over here. We start with gathering our knowledge. This becomes our local knowledge repository. And then there's this course structuring and planning. This would be course outlines, high-level outline that we share with the subject matter expert in a kickoff call, potentially. We also start creating terminal and enabling learning objectives, just kind of planning documents that you would need before you actually start building the curriculum. And then once that's been edited and revised by the subject matter experts, and we kind of feel like the order makes sense, then we go into the actual module development. This is kind of very specific to HeatSpring's delivery platform, which is a video first platform. We want an output video. That's our artifact. And so we have slide text, we have image descriptions, we have speaker notes. And I think you saw that in that anatomy of a prompt, but that's kind of what's generated. And then there's kind of a media production element where, to kind of show this arrow, like you start with this kind of vague image description. Like, I think you should pull this figure from this page on the PDF, and sometimes it works and it's accurate and you pull it in. Other times it's, a person standing looking at a boiler in the basement with a flashlight, and you have to think like, how good will AI be at making that? And then you have to enhance that prompt, give it more detail, and then it creates the image. And then I have some scripts on. Was there a question? Okay. And then I have some scripts that run locally that will take an output PNG file, an output MP3, and stitch it together into an MP4. It just does that, just runs locally on my computer to kind of helps me skip opening up a video editor. And I can demo some of those given time as well. So yeah, in the final assembly, it just stitches it together, and then we have an output video. And just to give you a sense of like what that might look like is when I build out that initial deck and I run my Python script, goes to Claude, gives me a JSON package, and then I say, look at this JSON package, turn it into a PowerPoint file. It looks like this, and this is what I gave it to SME to look at. And it's not that interesting, but it's enough for the expert to start providing feedback. And then I go through and I look at the images and I enhance the images with better prompts, and the output, like, it goes and it turns into something like this, where all of these are AI images that were created from working with these different tools. And it has speaker notes that are relevant to, like, it'll narrate through this. And so just to kind of show you what the output looks like. But let's take a look now and just see what were the tools that we use to do this. So this is going to be, I'm going to go over to, I have a couple tabs open. And what I'm going to walk through here is just the 5 different ways that we are using Claude to build out different parts of this course. And we wanted an exam weighted course outline. We knew that in this certification that the certifying body gave a very explicit weighted outline of like, this is the test you're taking. This 100-question test is going to have this percentage of this, this, and this, and this. And so we want to make sure at the beginning that we were weighting our course outline to that. And so then we kind of went and looked at the terminal and enabling learning objectives. We started building out module slides. Like I said, I had a weekly call with the subject matter expert, and I would take his feedback and like feed it back into the slide creation. I'll show you an example of like how that really helped improve. And then scenario-based assessments, where it's kind of not asking it to create slide decks, we're asking it to create scenarios and assessments that are challenging the student to think of this case study and then look at like kind of different outputs. So that's what we're going to look at right now. So let's go over here. And that first one is, the weighted average, and it's telling you that, this one is 8 to 10% of the average. And you can see the data collection was going to be our biggest one. But anyway, this kind of was the initial prompt. And it said, I'm giving it some courses to look at, some documents to look at, and I'm giving it some feedback here. And then I'm telling it to make the artifact as a markdown table. I find that, like, while I really like JSON for doing Python stuff and API stuff, I really like Markdown when I'm sharing it with people on the team or it's going into a Google Doc. And Claude does that really well, and I can copy this and put it in, turn this into a shareable Google Doc. So JSON for when I'm processing, Markdown for when I'm sharing with folks so that they can see it. But then you can see this is now an artifact that was created there. And then the next one, just to kind of go into the terminal learning objectives, this is a different part of the Claude interface. This one was a Claude project, and here's the artifact output. And you can see up here the icon changed because it's now telling me I'm in the console, the workbench. And this is where I have that system prompt that I kind of talked about at the enemy. I have my kind of XML tag saying this is what a terminal learning objective is. This is what the enabling learning objectives are. This is the relationship between the two. And I'm going to give you an example output format. And so this is just saying, like, again, I gave it structured feedback and then I gave it an example output. And then this evaluate is kind of like the history of when I ran this. And so to generate terminal learning objectives, I gave it an overview document that I put together. And if you run this, it would kind of think for a second. I think it's, I don't know if it's using Claude 3.5 or 3.7, but it would kind of run this and then output the enabling learning objectives and internal learning objectives that I could use. Yeah, here. So that's interesting. It put me down here, but you can kind of see I just ran this number 4. I asked it to look at this functions and tasks document, and it came up with a course outline, like objectives that I could use. That then I will take this artifact, get it reviewed by the SME, and then put it into the project knowledge, if that makes sense. I kind of put it back into Claude. So it's now referring to our terminal learn objectives. It's looking at the weighted course outline, and then I start giving it the PDFs to analyze. And that way it's trying to help it not hallucinate and stay kind of grounded on these documents that I created. This is an example. Okay, now I kind of bounce back. Or if you look at the interface, you can see that we are in Claude projects, and I gave it a PDF to analyze. And there was a really important part of a healthy home evaluation where someone's in a house and they're talking to the homeowner, and you need to kind of interview them and kind of get a history of what the problems they may have had in their house. And so they want to give the person learn tips and tricks on interviewing techniques for residents. And so I gave it the two kind of pieces of context to look at, and I asked it to create a slide deck, and you can see the output here. It created the output right here, and this is that JSON. And I could copy this, save it locally to a JSON file, and then have it run through and build a deck. This pasted content is what you're looking at on the right side of the screen is one of the artifacts that I placed in there. So that's kind of why that was there. But that's an example of how I kind of ran. I gave it some context, and it has this slide insert tool is interesting. I was talking about how I use I have like a bunch of different projects in Claude, and this one is my expert slide creation tool. And this is where I give it its instructions. This is essentially the system prompt, and its persona is to only build slide decks. And it has that structure, the JSON output, and the targeted link. So you're probably seeing a pattern. This is just my template for getting those slide decks out. But this is kind of my slide insert tool, and it's only going to create 1 to 3. I could change that and say create 10. Create as many as you think should be part of the outline. It depends on the context. All right, this next one, that one I just showed you is just me creating a deck, but then I'll have this as a subject matter expert look at it, and he looks at it and he says, okay, I think this resident first approach is really important. I've done this for 10 years, and I see people in the field don't really have a good understanding. Can you kind of expand on this? And he actually gave me specific. I was like recording the call and taking notes, and I created this new XML tag. And these are just these can be any. It's whatever tag you want. It's just something that provides a structured input for the learner. But I was like, you want to start with the resident, begin by understanding who lives there, start with the resident hat, gather occupant information, then switch to the building science hat. These are all things that came directly from the SME in our weekly calls. And I could like bring that in, revise the deck, and have it create a revised output. And I just share this with you to show that like there's a dialogue between me, the expert, and the tool, and I'm using their feedback, the human in the loop, to then inject and guide the next iteration. And I think our next one is a scenario. And the scenario, this is different. The other ones I showed you were creating slides. This is actually creating an assessment that is like a case study. And to look at this prompt, it looks a little different. You're an expert at creating high quality scenario based assessment questions. I know it might seem silly to like say that, but like to put this persona in does help. I give it kind of Bloom's taxonomy background. I tell it to kind of, I'd say this is kind of what I want, concepts for plausible choices, provide detailed consequences and feedback. And the reason that we do this is that we have in our platform the ability to have formative assessments that are instantly scored and provide feedback instantly. And so we thought, what if we created a short kind of 20-second video that kind of gave the scenario, and then once you heard that scenario narrated, you could go in and pick your kind of, which of these four are the most, which of these four, which is the best one. And that's different than like a strict multiple choice type question that it's like there was more to it. And so I gave a JSON output and a background, and then say, I want to create 5. And then the document here, this is just saying, what are you going to give me to build out? And I would essentially just give the slide decks. And the assessments are coming after the deck has been built and edited. We're like, let's lift out some scenarios from this module and present it. And so that our input would be the slide deck. And these ones here are examples of um, we're providing kind of a background on who the person is that's taking these assessments, and then what we're providing. If you this, what I'm scrolling through right here is just the JSON document that is the slide deck, and so it's looking at that. And it's like, okay, this is my starting point for assessments. And we tinkered with that, whether we should start here or go right back to the source of truth with the high level PDFs in the knowledge base. And we found that by giving it the distilled PowerPoint deck, it was kind of creating more accurate, like it was only creating scenarios from content they just learned, basically. Okay, that was kind of an example of how we use Claude. And to kind of come back to the presentation, this is all text-based. This is all just creating text. But as we get it edited and revised, there's a lot of visuals that need to go into this. And so what I thought I might do now is just kind of talk about how I started using different ways to kind of start layering in images. And I don't know if there are any questions, or if I've just been talking kind of nonstop here. If there are any questions about Claude, Workbench, projects, anything like that, I'm happy to take them now, or I can do them at the end. But I just realized I kind of was just talking.
I think there was just a quick question about the Claude intellectual property from Priscilla, enterprise version, and any comments on IP or any of that.
Yeah, we chose Claude specifically because they say in their on their website in clear language in their privacy policy that nothing that we provide it when we're logged in to these tools is used in their training data. And I'm not sure if that addresses the question specifically. And we actually I had an interaction with someone in Anthropic's legal department that like actually emailed me and addressed my concerns, and that gave us the confidence to kind of explicitly state on HeatSpring's website the tools that we use and how we value copyright and the IP. Because, like, we have authors that wrote a 300-page book that they're selling on Amazon, and they would give us permission to upload that book into Claude, and we have to kind of give them insurance that that's not just gonna be kind of scraped, ripped out, and show up somewhere else for, so that's very important to us. That's a good question. I don't know if I addressed that, but that's why we don't use certain other tools, that we don't have the confidence that they respect that. In fact, there's some tools out there that are very cavalier around hoovering up whatever they can to train. So we think Claude Anthropic has the right kind of constitutional AI, right kind of ethics framework for us to use it. But for image generation, and I'm going to kind of do this quickly because I know that we're running up on time. I just wanted you to think about, let me go full screen here. This was something, my evolution of creating visuals, that there are actually different kinds of visuals that you might include in training. And it's important that you use the tools for use their strengths in different ways. Like I wouldn't go to an image generation tool and ask it to create a data visualization. I would just go straight to Claude, upload my documents and say, create a data visualization. In fact, that's exactly what I did here. This is like if you're creating data visualizations, don't use an image creation tool, use data visualization, and then I gave it a PDF, super dense NREL PDF with like lots of visualizations. I asked it to summarize, give me takeaways, and then I asked it to make it interactive, and it created these little kind of React components that were little graphs that I could download and use or screenshot. I mean, these are all different artifacts that you can use, but the main point here is that when you are creating data, if you're creating data as the visual, you use a data visualization tool. Don't try and create an image of it. It won't do a good job of that. And then for the other types of images, workflow and process, I had referenced Napkin. Those of you might be familiar with Napkin. If you haven't used it, it's fun for me to like share this tool with folks on the call because it's so great because you can just kind of select something and say, build a visual of this, and it thinks for a second, and it's going to come back with kind of a gallery of different styles. I have to kind of get it in screen here, but it'll show you, different visuals of uh, that text. And this kind of takes me back to like battling with smart art inside PowerPoint or something like that, or building out a visual manually. This is a really great kind of fast way to do that. So that is workflows. I don't know, kind of infographics. This is a really powerful tool for that. But it's again, I'm not going to an image generation tool to do that. And then finally, image generation. Then it's like, do you want it to be photorealistic? Is it an illustration? And the main learning for me was that in that original prompt that I shared with you, I asked Claude to give an image description, and I was kind of feeding that into the various tools, and I was getting back not good images, not usable images. In fact, I can just kind of show you what some of these looked like. Let's see. I mean, just kind of take a look at this one on the left. Sarah notices that her basement has a strong sewer smell. Upon inspection, she finds a floor drain that she didn't know existed. And that image is kind of absurd, just because that's a huge floor drain if you didn't notice that. You couldn't use that in any kind of training because now the image is distracting and it's not accurate. But what I did was I used Claude to become an expert image prompt improver. And it gave it specific details. It focused in on the most important part of that image, which was the floor drain. And it gave enough details here where I could put that in on a slide and I like know that it's complementing what the content is and it's not distracting. And that's kind of like using an image prompt and running it through is kind of the tip for that. And then also, as these models have gotten better, I'm sure everyone on the call has heard about OpenAI's ability to kind of do Studio Ghibli or Simpsons or anything, and it does those really well. Other tools can do that, where it's kind of more of just a stylistic one. And just as an example, these are examples of, a tiny world, 3D rendering, isometric, um, show a green energy building of a heat pump and indoor mini split with the compressor. And it just handles all these things. It just builds it. And I kind of picked the best one. This one on screen here is built with Imagen 3. That is from uh, Google, uh, Google Gemini. I think it came from DeepMind. I kind of don't fully understand all of the teams that are working on AI within Google, but I know that Imagen 3 created these two on screen here, and these really benefit from tweaking the style to photorealistic, which I shared earlier in that output example, where I needed it to look like mold on a real building. Or when we're doing interview techniques, we didn't, there's sensitivities around photorealistic humans in the training. And we thought, in working with our subject matter expert, we thought a middle ground was kind of a stylized artistic rendering with watercolor, pen and ink. And so that ended up being kind of our style here. And that I cut off the prompt because it's actually quite a bit longer than this, but this was just kind of an example of how we were starting to use image prompts. That that is the main ways that we were using images and honing images in the image prompt. And I guess I could show you, yeah, I'd like to show you quickly what the image prompt looks like. So these are all my projects, and we have a learning path recommendation, but we have the image prompt helper. So again, the instructions are really important. And you can see here, I'm building out different styles to pay attention to. Do photorealistic, do pen and ink. I mean, I could see this building out over time if I really use this a lot, but basically what it's doing is it's going and it's starting, I give it an initial description and I say, improve this. And it analyzes for the subject composition, detail, atmosphere, style, refine, and it kind of, it goes through a thinking model and it goes through, uh, you can see an example of what I gave it. A photorealistic basement setting with a fire extinguisher, and it kind of go and it just starts thinking through, and then I can take this and paste it into Imagen. And again, I don't know, some of these, like I don't create an automation for everything. I am the human copy paster that just takes it from one tool, tabs over and pastes it in another. But that's kind of an example of the workflow that I was talking about. With the remaining time, I know we have a little bit of time left. Um, I could see, is there interest in looking at how I kind of think about how I tinker with building out different learning experience ideas or building out kind of single purpose apps with Anthropic, or sorry, Replit. I could do this quickly if there's interest, or we could pause and we could kind of go into kind of any Q&A. Like, is there a thumbs up on a quick kind of like how I put on my learning designer sandbox model, or do we want to talk about kind of the workflow for building out that course?
Anybody has any burning questions? I'd love to see a quick walkthrough, but I just wanted to see, also open it up for any, if anybody has any burning questions. First time, second time. And maybe just give us a walkthrough.
Cool.
Would be
All right.
awesome.
So what's on screen here is I would chat with Claude and ask it to build out an interaction, and it spits out a React component. And so I would start up a React server locally, and that's what's running here. And this was me experimenting with taking documentation of this single line diagram or wiring diagram and just kind of walk through and label the components. And so it took the image, it analyzed the PDF, and it turned it into kind of a simple kind of like, and it placed those numbers there, and it put the text there. And I had someone look at this and vet that this was accurate. So this is just an example of like an interaction that we could potentially put into our site. Another one is just kind of like, if you're thinking about flashcards, you can tell it to build a flashcard and it can kind of gamify it with like points and things like that. But again, there's just a really simple flashcard idea. And this is something I can share this with our developers if we're thinking about putting flashcards, putting that into our platform. This animated line is interesting. This is where you would take a heat pump and you would want to potentially show someone the refrigerant. And this is, again, I just chatted with Claude to build this, but you can kind of show someone, you just draw and mark up an image, and then you can hit play. And the thick, oh, it's solid, it needs to be dashed. Sorry. So you could kind of, let me try a dash now. So just so you see, I'm drawing a dashed line, and it's kind of, this is really important in our work because you want to show the flow of something. And after multiple conversations, I would talk about like helping them visualize where it goes. And this could be, screen record this and put it into our course, or the expert could be, have this loaded onto their screen and talking about it. But again, this is just kind of not an app that we deploy, but something that kind of helped us think about that. Yeah, we're kind of light on time, but I guess the last one that I think is interesting is sometimes I'll use Replit. I don't know if folks on the call use Replit, but I went to a conference and there was about 30 people that I wanted to talk to, and I was like, could I build a little flashcard app for me to I run it on my phone as I'm on the plane or in the lounge to kind of like help like read the background of the person and you know flip the card, learn about who they are. Actually, this is not the best. It's kind of crunched there, but this is like a little flashcard app that was turned and made a CSV file kind of interactive for me to kind of see, do I know this person? I'm somewhat familiar, and then Kelly Larson, I know them, and this person, Brian Hollick, flipped the card. He's an instructor. I know him. And there's only 30 people. I'm not going to deploy this app. I just use this for me to kind of build a little interaction. And then the last one, just to kind of show you something that actually is real that we did build, is let's see, the one that we use a lot, speaker notes synthesizer. This one is one where when we have the finalized deck that we like the narration that SME signed off on it. Um, the the output is a PowerPoint file. And I go to 11 labs and I could kind of individually paste all those in. Or uh, what I built was I can browse locally for my PowerPoint deck, have it analyze that, take out the speaker notes, send just the speaker notes to 11 labs, and then return a zipped file of the MP3s. And so that just helps me batch process, not copy pasting 350 paste into 11 labs, like using the API, and Replit just does that so well. And again, you kind of just chat your way to a little app. And I'm not going to deploy this. It's just for me, but it's kind of a nice, helpful tool. So that was kind of my whistle stop tour where I kind of had a little bit of interaction playground at the end. I think we're kind of wrapping up, and I addressed this just a little bit at the end, is that output formats, JSON is really good for Python API calls. Markdown is great for working with clients, getting into a collaborative document. CSV is really good for that data analysis. If you upload a CSV, Claude is going to like be your BI team and just build a dashboard if you want. Blank text, I tend to not use that at all just because it's not very helpful. And then this was our kind of testing, like when we built those knowledge checks into our platform. I tinkered with it. I experimented in Workbench. I did a little bit of like Jupyter notebooks or kind of just Python testing. Once I got it stabilized, I gave it to our developers, and then they kind of scaled it, and they did all of the things that you do when you're deploying something into production. They did, and for us, that just ended up looking like I said, instantly scored, instant feedback for every kind of answer, right or wrong. You can kind of see that after a, a module, and that was us using AI, where it took the video transcript, sent it to Claude, returned back formative assessments, and then it shows up right after the video. So I'll pause there, and if there are any questions or feedback, I'm happy to chat. And if there was more later, I got my emails here, and you can come and follow up with me later. But Priscilla, yes, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, I had a lot of questions more about the application. So this is great for certifications, for just giving content to folks. But the question I have is, how do you make sure that folks are applying the content to their specific use case? We have a lot of scenarios in my work where folks, the application is where people really struggle, because it's it's very unique. And so learning from other individuals of how they've tried, so building some sort of, comments section where people can talk about how they've applied a learning, or a way in which, maybe a reasoning agent or something like that, where you can have, similar to ChatGPT, but on specific content, where applications, where you can give it application questions and they can kind of help you reason through that. Have you tried any of those materials or any of those tools to do that?
Yeah, it's funny. It's an interesting question because it's something that we are it's on our where it's not on the current sprints, but it's something that it's in our backlog, and we're really I've created a document to kind of help us better understand how we can provide better interaction and applied interaction with our courses beyond just like quiz, video, quiz. And we're not quite sure what that looks like. But we think it's a combination of chat and flashcards and summative assessments, informative, and just trying to like give them multiple touch points for them to interact with the content in the way that is most helpful. I think for a lot of our students, they are highly motivated by that external certification. And the proof is, did our course help them pass the test? And if it didn't, we hear from them. But if it did, then they're like, this is a great course, 5 stars, it helped me pass the test. So we're we know that certifications are really important, but when they aren't, we're trying to figure out how they actually can, let's like take that knowledge and apply it internally, where it's not necessarily a certification. You just need to learn this and interact with it so that you can apply it. Yeah. Yes, Max.
Hey, Brick. So this is more general, but I definitely wanted to give you your props on this. I really appreciated how you structured this to be explaining essentially the AI aspect of it and then how the human comes into loop every time. I also think I know a lot of people are familiar with ChatGPT and the capabilities there, but it does seem like people haven't fully grasped in some sense like what Claude does differently and where it comes into play. And so again, I really appreciated how you show like the first step, genuinely just prompting Claude, taking what it gives you, applying the human brain versus the machine brain, then showing the next step, using what you built with Claude in the original step, and then what you tweaked to build the next thing. It was very coherent, very clear how to get that across. And just as far as like an L&D perspective and teaching people how to use these tools appropriately and build out these courses, I really like the way you presented that, and I learned a lot. So thank you.
Yeah. That actually, it's it's a higher bar when I'm presenting to a bunch of folks in L&D, because if your pedagogy's off or you can't really present, like this is a discerning audience. I appreciate that. I kind of struggled with how to explain it, and it's a lot of like one tab to this tab, and then it's this interface, and then it's that interface, and then it looks like JSON. Now it's XML. It's like there's a lot in there that's like, are you following along? And so I'm happy that it was there, and hopefully the recording, you can go back and look at it. And if there's any follow-up questions, I'm happy to kind of like just set up time and just walk through it more patiently. Because I do these workshops. I've done with the Department of Energy and with some startups in Seattle, kind of using this for their own L&D teams, or sometimes they're just like some one person trying to use Claude better. So yeah, it depends. But yeah, I'm always trying to figure out ways to help people use it beyond kind of the chat window. And I think Claude is really powerful. It's lesser known, but the people who love and use Claude were really kind of like really big fans of it. So glad that I could share that. Not anti-ChatGPT. This is a tool that we use.
I honestly just don't use Claude enough, to be honest. So I'm going to use it a lot more with some strategies I kind of came up with on the fly watching you today. So again, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, the projects are super powerful, and custom instructions. You're just like, it's not agentic, but you start to have these like personas in a little quiver of experts that can build stuff for you. And I just go there all the time to do what I need.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Greg. This was super useful. I love these walkthroughs. I love when it's real. I love when it's not just filtering through the slides. It's actually seeing you doing your magic in real time. So thank you for that. Super appreciate it. Learned a lot. I love my takeaway was experts in the loop, but also how do we bring community into the loop, or the learners. So there's something there to kind of ponder further on. So super useful. But thank you all, and great to see everyone in Technicon. this month, and we're always looking for speakers. So feel free to reach out to us, and the best way is to reach out to Mark and me, and connect. Looking forward to seeing you next month. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.